I hate to say I told you so, but I did tell you so. And I'll explain that and a whole lot more on tonight's episode of In the Crease. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to In the Crease. Hey, before we get started, I want to thank once again Ray Ravizolo for swinging by and talking to us on the last show. Always interesting to talk to Ray. He always has some good things going on up there, and nice to talk to him about goaltending and all that good kind of stuff. And you know what? I got to tell you, this is the year. I told you this was going to be the season of the vintage hockey jerseys. Last show I had Cam Neely's vintage Vancouver Canuck jersey on, and I know you're looking at me and you're saying, well, Fior, that's the Edmonton Oilers, you know. And unless you're like a really good hockey aficionado like George Wagner is, then you probably don't notice the little nuances. But this is truly a vintage. I'm gonna do something here. The guys in the studio hate when I do this kind of stuff because they don't know what's coming. But here it comes. So stay with me now here. Show you how vintage this is. You see that? Can you see that? That is Paul Coffey's number 7 Edmonton Oiler jersey. Vintage, just like I said. You know, this is actually the first time I wore this jersey. I had to cut the tags off before I came into the studio, so it's pretty cool stuff. Okay, Heroes of Hockey collection, I think it's called. And, you know, let's talk a little bit about goalies. After our talk with Ray, we probably should. I've told you for years on this TV show that what was happening in hockey was a travesty to goaltenders. Not just the fact that the league constantly wants to blame them for their scores not being as high as NBA scores and messing with their equipment, but they restrict the goaltenders as much as and they would let these forwards come crashing into the net. They restricted the goalie's limits with that trapezoid. They'd even let defensemen come in and crash the net. And nobody, you know, you couldn't have an enforcer fighting they're trying to get rid of. So instead of teams backing up their goaltenders, and I said years ago that the goaltending position would have to change. You couldn't just have these big jamokes in there who would drop to their knee and try to block as much of the 4x6 as possible. You'd have to get back to the style of goaltender of Billy Smith and Ron Hextall, where these guys would be angry and they would come out, and if you ran them or, you know, even embarrassed them with a fancy move, they came out swinging and they would knock the living hell out of you. And you know what? It's starting to be. Did you see all the fights already started by Ryan Miller, who we talked about with Ray? I think he's 150 pounds soaking wet. Ryan Miller was charged in a game earlier this year, and bam, right out of the net he came and started sticking up for his defenseman. It's happening across the league, and you know, everybody knows I hate the Montreal Canadiens. Of all 30 teams, soon to be 31 in the league, there's only one that I just won't like, and that's the Montreal Canadiens. And I'll tell you why sometime down the road. But I do like Carey Price. I like the way he plays, and it was just a little while ago that Kyle Palmieri decided he was going to take some liberties with Carey Price, and finally, Carey Price did what every goaltender in this league should start doing. He took matters into his own hands. Take a look at this.
Oh, Palmieri trying to find a little room. Palmieri dancing in, gets around Petrie to the net, and then punts it at Price coming through the crease, and Price takes exception to that. Couple blocker chops for Palmieri.
And you know, they say you got to practice what you preach, and believe me, I do. Back in the day, and Dane Cook says it was a Wednesday back then. So I played in what was known in the area as the Gasoline League, and I believe, I will check on this, but I believe I still hold the record for number of games being tossed out of by a goaltender while I was playing in that league. But I actually had people who were afraid to come in on me because they knew if they scored, there was going to be major retaliation. And just to show you that the goaltenders do have to stand up, they do have to. Here's a brave young man back down in the Junior A league. Check this out.
Johnson fell to the ground, backhand, save Mastraki, or couldn't get the rebound. Underhill has it. His shot saved by Mastraki. Goes around the other end, and now we're going to have a penalty coming up. Oh, and now they're all going at it. Mastraki just throws him in the back of the head. Mastraki's throwing punches. Mastraki now drops his glove. The goaltender Mastraki is drilling Jonathan Orr in the back of the head. Here comes David Weinstein. Weinstein's getting involved. Jonathan Orr has Mastraki. Weinstein's all the way down the ice, being pushed away by the linesman. We have two battles going on.
Okay, that clip happened about 8 years ago, and at the time, Jonathan Orr was the #1 defenseman in that league, and he took a run at that guy. You know, who was that guy? Who? Yeah, and he just, blocker pad comes right in handy. And that's, believe me, you're going to see a lot more of this in the NHL, especially if goaltenders do not want to end up on the IR and want to continue playing. Need these guys. Let's talk about another goaltender, shall we? Okay. Ryan Miller. He's back in the news again. This time it's not about equipment. Now, let me tell you how we get to Ryan Miller. There's a big feud going on right now between Connor McDavid and Brandon Manning. Okay. No relation to Peyton. Okay. Apparently Manning, for those of you that are uninitiated, hit McDavid last year, broke his collarbone. And at the time, David said, "Hey, that was he planned to do that. That was real." The league came in right away and quieted up McDavid. "Oh, you're a rookie. You can't be causing these waves. Shut up." Bettman coming in with his shiny little head, trying to keep everything. We're all happy, and we look at the world through rose-colored glasses here in the NHL. Well, this year, Manning, in an interview, comes out and basically says, "Yeah, he's right. I tried to take him out of the game. I tried to break his shoulder." So McDavid is in front of the microphone screaming and yelling once again. And who comes to defend Connor McDavid? None other than Wayne Gretzky. And this is boiling into a really nice feud between these two players, something that, is very reminiscent of old time, vintage hockey, if you will, and I like it. But it still doesn't beat the classic press conference that occurred some years back between Ryan Miller, he was still playing with Buffalo at the time, and Milan Lucic. And Lucic was playing with the Boston Bruins at the time. So Buffalo and Boston, kind of a rivalry to begin with. And this was Ryan Miller's press conference.
Injury standpoint, how do you feel?
Not going to really get into that. I just stuck around because I just want to say what a piece of shit I think Lucic is. 50 pounds on me and runs me like that. It's unbelievable. Everyone in the city sees him as a big, tough, solid player. I respected him for how hard he played. That was gutless. Gutless. Piece of
Now, in case you've forgotten what made Miller so upset and caused him to have that kind of a press conference, here's the actual hit that he was complaining about.
Panic rotating. Lucic has a breakaway. The puck gets out beyond Miller, way out. Lucic barrels into Miller, and here we go.
The neat thing about looking at that is you can see Miller's been knocked into Never Never Land. But, as he's falling back to the ice, he tries valiantly. One time, swinging that goaltender stick, trying to slash the legs from Lucic. He missed completely, but it might have been fun if he actually would have. This is the kind of stuff it's coming down to. It's the nature of the game. Nothing you can do about it. Let it go. Speaking of other things that you can't do much about, how about this John Scott rule that Bettman and the league have put in? And it's specifically, they're calling it the John Scott rule because of what happened. Now, for those of you that may be watching the show for the first time, or possibly you've forgotten this entire incident already, last year for the NHL All-Star game, they let the fans vote and pick people. And the people in Arizona are a very unique crowd. I've probably been at more Arizona games than any other team in the league. So they're very unique. No matter who they're playing on a given night, when you go into their arena, which is now I think Gila River Arena. At the time it was Jobbings Arena a lot of times when I went there. Yeah, they're the only team that when you go to see them play, the majority of the fans in the stands are wearing the jerseys from the opposite team and not the home. It's just kind of unique that way. So the Arizona fans, and they're voting for the NHL All-Star ballot, put John Scott on. John Scott is playing for Arizona at the time, and basically he's a goon, okay, like the movie. He's kind of a goon. He gets out there and he's an enforcer. He's, probably what teams need a little bit more of to keep everything on the up and up. The league goes ballistic. They can't believe that somebody like John Scott has garnered all these votes, and now they're embarrassed to put him on the team. So what happens is the Coyotes are pressured. They end up sending Scott down to the minors, and then they start questioning, well, if he's in the minors, he can't be on the All-Star team, and the fans go bonkers. The fans say, oh, we voted him, we want him, Then they end up shifting him off to Montreal or some godly place, and, the bottom line is John Scott manages to get into the All-Star game, scores 2 goals, and is named the MVP. Now, the league has total egg on their face over this whole scenario, okay? So they came out with this new rule that has all kind of algorithms in it that, if a player does this or he's sent down to the minors or there's like 27 and a half days before the full moon comes, they can keep a player out. Basically what they did was they took control over who's going to be on the All-Star team. Hey, if you're going to do that, that's fine. That's the way you guys used to do it in the old days. You picked the All-Stars and you had the All-Star game. You were the guys that changed it and turned it over to fan voting. If you're going to have fans vote for who they want in the All-Star game, then you got to let the fans speak. You can't come in and say, the fans are stupid, we don't want this guy, we're going to pick our own guy. But that didn't stop Bettman and the league from putting a big spin on this thing. And even when you tried to talk to the announcers and former players, you could tell, they're really not believing this. They're reading off a script. Take a look.
Pleased to be joined now by last year's NHL All-Star MVP, the one and only John Scott. John, thanks for doing this. What were your first thoughts when you saw the new rules amendment for the voting procedure for the All-Star game?
Yeah, I expected something to come about, and it's good. I think something had to happen. I don't think they wanted a situation like me to happen again. So, guys from the AHL, guys who were hurt, I don't think they should be included anymore. I think it was a one-time thing, and it's a good rule.
Do you think that it's possible for something like the phenomenon that was you last season to ever happen again?
I don't know. It kind of lightning struck there. I don't know how it's possible to do it again, but you never know. There's some good personalities out there in the NHL, but it's one of those things. Everything kind of aligned perfectly for the whole situation. So I don't think so.
You're writing a book about your career, and certainly a lot of it will revolve around the All-Star Game experience for you. When you look back at what happened last year in Nashville, what was your main takeaway?
The main takeaway was I was surprised at how well the fans received me. I didn't know how I was going to be received going in there. I thought I was going to be booed, to be honest with you, but the fans and everybody really were welcoming, so it was a cool experience.
Now, if John Scott decided to go to NHL.com when the voting opened and voted for someone that he wanted to see at the All-Star Game this year, out of the full 700-plus members of the National Hockey League, who would you click for, John?
Oh, boy. I think for sheer entertainment factor, to have someone like John Scott, I'd go with my buddy Steve Ott. He's always funny. But, I like Marc-Edouard Vlasic. I don't think he gets his due. I think he's a good D-man. But those two guys you can't go wrong with.
Now, why Marc-Edouard Vlasic, of all people?
He's just this guy. He's super quiet. And he doesn't really need any attention at all. All he does is do his job. He's the best defenseman in the league, in my opinion, and he just doesn't get recognized for it. So I think he would be a good pick.
John, before we let you go, thoughts on the NHL right now? You are no longer part of it as we speak right now. Do you still get a chance to watch?
It's insanely boring. No, no, it's good. The young kids are making it interesting. So I've enjoyed a couple games. But yeah, it's weird to watch it. I'll just say that.
John, thanks so much for doing this.
And you know what the coup de grace is on this entire story? John Scott, just about a week ago, announced his retirement, I believe after 16 seasons from the NHL. So he's gone. He doesn't want to give any interviews on the whole situation. You know, I told you about the Montreal Canadiens, and I'll give you a little bit of a history here. It's one of the reasons why I can't stand this team. You know, they have like 27,000 Stanley Cup victories, and they brag about it because of all professional sports teams in any sport around the world. They have the most Stanley Cup. They have the championship, the record number of times, or what have you. But what a lot of people won't tell you is that the majority of those wins should come with an asterisk next to it. You see, going all the way back to the days of the original six, the Canadians thought hockey was their sport, and really no one else from any other country had any right to be in there. This is a pervasive attitude that still holds today. If you don't believe me, listen hard to the CBC announcers and even listen to Don Cherry. He'll tell you the same thing. They don't want other players than Canadian players in the league. So the way it was set back is when the draft would come during those early years, the Canadian teams were able to pick before any of the American teams. And they didn't pick once. They looked at the whole school of draft players and they picked whoever they wanted. And then once those players were all removed, whatever was left, that's what the American teams were able to pick from. And of the Canadian teams that were involved in the original six and continuing on through league expansion, the Montreal Canadiens and the Toronto Maple Leafs grabbed their picks first before any other Canadian team because they were considered the elite of the elite. That's, I mean, picture that with any other sport today, how that would go through. Look at our Pittsburgh Pirates. If during the draft the Pirates were able to go into the entire draft pool and pick as many players as they wanted to put into their roster and their system, and then left the rest for the league, yeah, I would expect them to have a few more World Series rings too, wouldn't you? So this whole, you know, the greatest team, 90 million, and nobody mentions that draft story. That's true. Look it up. I wouldn't steer you wrong here. So the whole thing was rigged. Now, what does that have to do with morning skates? I'm glad you asked. In the 1970s, the Montreal Canadiens had a pretty powerhouse team. They really did. Kenny Dryden in nets, and you had Lafleur, all those guys. And what happened was the coach at the time decided to put in a morning skate. Up until this time, there wasn't such a thing. You would just skate, have a practice before the, you know, a couple hours before the game, and then warm-ups, and then game time. So he decides to put in a morning skate. And now you get an early morning skate, which is 2 or 3 hours. Then you have your normal practice session, and then you have your game. So the Canadians start doing this, and everybody in the league says, you know, those Canadians, they've won an awful lot of Stanley Cups. They have a strong team now. They're still winning Stanley Cups. This must be their secret. Morning skates. We'll add on morning skates because the Canadians are doing it. Every team in the league starts morning skates. And then finally, takes an Italian. John Tortorella comes along and says, what's the deal with these morning skates? My guys are getting burned out by the time, you know, game time comes along. He gets rid of them. It sends shockwaves through the league. How can you possibly have a team, towards coach of the Blue Jackets now, how can you possibly have a team with no more? Have you seen what the Blue Jackets have been doing? I think when we're taping this now, I think they're on like 8 or 9 wins in a row. They're riding roughshod on top of their division. The Blue Jackets, okay? And Torch just got rid of the entire morning skate. You know, it makes an awful lot of sense. I thought those morning skates were stupid to begin with. Here's John Tortorella, coach of the Columbus Blue Jackets, explaining why he got rid of them.
We're doing our work today that we usually do in the morning, and when I can, I want to start trying to keep the team away from the morning. I don't know why we always do it. We bring them in here one time a day during practice days, but on game days we bring them in twice. It doesn't make any sense. And with our schedule coming up the way it is, we're trying to get our guys out of the building as much as we can. I want to see, these guys are creatures of habit and the routine, but that routine in our league, I think, is wrong as far as these pregame skates and all the overcoaching that goes on with that stuff. So today's a good work day for us. We have video after. We had video before. So we worked it into our practice day because they can come in and just play the game.
Now, have you done this before about
I have tried, not with this team, I have tried it with other teams, but then the players end up getting their back up because of that routine that was brought in who knows when in this game. And I just, especially with the schedule coming up with us, I want to see it. This part of the schedule lends itself to us to do this because we have some practice days before games. And I just want them as fresh as possible. The most important thing is playing the hockey games.
In talking with people who've been here since the beginning or people who've been here a long time, they were saying that you have given these guys this year more days off than they're used to. I'm sure you have got a good reason for it. Your thoughts?
Yeah, just for that. I think with the camp that we had and how where they were ready for the camp, they had a really good camp. And I look at the schedule, the National Hockey League schedule, the amount of traveling we do. I look, when we get it in July, the schedule, I look for days off, not to see how many days we can practice, how many days off we can get them. Because I am not going to practice, I hope I don't have to, unless the team forces me to make another decision. I do not want to practice 2 days in a row at all this year. I don't.
Did you consult anybody on this? Because you always hear about these guys that talk to sleep therapists, those type of people. This is just your own.
Yes. No, I didn't consult the sleep doctor. No. This is
part of the whole self-coaching thing over the summer. This
is what I've always tried to do.
Yep.
Sometimes the label is that we're kicking the hell out of them, or at least this coach is. I am trying to help the athlete be as fresh as they can to play the games. I have always gone about it that way. You check with any teams that I've coached, they've probably led the league in days off each year that we've played. Because we do. We practice too much. We coach too much. If we don't have them here, then we don't have to coach them. And I really do. I think the coaches really feel they have to keep on giving them information when they're here. So we're going to go about it that way.
I don't know. Torts always gets a lot of bad press. I like him. He's straight off the cuff. No filters whatsoever, you know, and I just think he's great for hockey, and he's the kind of coach I would like on my team. So I think what he said makes perfect sense, and it's still having ripples. There are some other teams that have started to get rid of the morning skates, which makes an awful lot of sense when you look at the schedules and everything like that. So I see this as a trend that's going to pick up, and other teams are going to grab it, and it's only going to be those few diehards that are going to stick to it because somehow they think they're going to be like the Canadians. Yeah. I know you don't need this. Who does? But are you ready for another reason to hate the Philadelphia Flyers? Despite their year, here it comes. For some reason this year, the Flyers fans started using the Ric Flair woo. You know? Woo! Like that. So when the team would score or something good would happen, the whole arena would go, woo! And the Flyers, players, and their head coach were angry about it. They got pissed off about the whole thing. They're screaming and yelling and calling the fans, their own fans who are doing this, stupid. I can't believe it. I wonder what Ric Flair would say about this. Now, there's been a lot of camaraderie between the pro wrestling WWE folks and the celebrities there and other professional sports. It's been going on for years. Some athletes have even made guest spots on WrestleMania and stuff. Why the Flyers decided this wasn't going to work, I don't know. I know the announcer, the ring announcer in Vancouver, and I believe the one in Boston, but don't quote me on that. They do the Ric Flair woo after the home team scores. They announce, goal scored by, assisted by, woo, and there it goes. And they do it right over the PA system. I couldn't understand why the Flyers would be upset about this. Now, to show you the difference between a class act and the Flyers, okay? I think this is a few years ago. The Indianapolis Colts managed to get into the playoffs, and Andrew Luck led them there, okay? So their players, all excited because they're in the playoffs, and I think they were going up against the Patriots, which is no daunting feat. I mean, you got to face Tom Brady and probably the best team in football. So what happens? They take on this Ric Flair persona, and they did a whole thing, and Ric Flair jumped in on the whole process. The whole thing was kind of neat. Here's a look at it.
I am a Rolex wearing, 2 Hall of Fame ring wearing, kiss stealing, wheeling dealing, limousine riding, jet flying, woo! Son of a gun that's about to make these alligators fly. When I first heard about Sergio Brown doing an impression on Nature Boy, I had to see it to believe it. Jet flying, son of a gun. But Sergio, brother, you are the man. I've seen a lot of guys try that stuff and not pull it off. Rolex wearing, diamond ring wearing, hit dealing, wheeling dealing, limousine ride, jet flying, son of a gun. And I'm having a hard time holding these alligators down. If I was Andrew Luck, I would fly into Boston. I'd be jet flying. And I'd be saying to myself, Tom who? You play great players every day. Game over. Colts win. Now it's Tom Brady. We all love Tom. He's my hero. He's married to Giselle. But that doesn't bring anything to the game. And you guys can beat him on Sunday night. Woo! Hey, Sergio, man, as I wish you and the Colts good luck on Sunday, let's remember, it's 2 claps and a Ric Flair. Give me 2 claps and a Ric Flair.
Now, see, that's the kind of fun you could be having with the game instead of the Flyers, you know, with their hockey sticks like up in the air and they can't be. Flyers. Finally. We've all been down this road. We've all been there. You're playing in an adult league. Some people call it a beer league, some men's league, whatever. You know, guys, their playing days are over, but they still like the sport, so they want to get together and play a little bit. And, you know, it never fails. Each team has at least one, sometimes more, of these guys on the team that, you know, you're in a men's league. You're in the beer league playing hockey. It's not the Stanley Cup, but you can't tell them that. They think it is. They are dead serious on every little thing that happens on the ice. They want to pull out rule books and go into semantics. And man, if you call them for a penalty, why? Not them, you know. They could miss out on winning the prize. There's no prize, but you know, this is the way they, well, listen, if you've ever encountered these kind of freilocks on the ice before, you might take a little comfort in knowing that is not indigenous to just the players here in Canada and America. Check this clip out from a referee helmet cam of a game in Russia.
Вратарь в площади ворот еще раз бы находился. Завязывай давай хрень заниматься. Атака игрока, не владеющего шайбой. 10 минут. Завязывай. Ты что творишь? 6 номер, 10 минут сейчас, пожалуйста. За что? За физический контакт с судьей. Ну ты что, одурел что ли? Какого сейчас вы там удалили? Я подъехал, 44-й. Да ты мне за 10 минут за это что ли? Ты что, уебать что ли, блин? Ну а что он меня за сколько минут? 6 номер, на скамейку проедем. За 110 минут? За физический контакт с судьей. Дебил! Серег, успокойтесь, успокойтесь. Вы что делаете? Я вообще убью сейчас, блядь. Сынок, блядь.
There's one on every team, isn't there? Isn't there? Just, take a seat. Hey, we're fresh out of time. Hope I brought you up on some of the more interesting things that you don't get in the normal hockey reports because nobody wants to delve into this stuff too much. But you got it here on In the Crease. And before we run out of here, I want to make sure to tell you that this is going to be our last show until the holidays are all over. So on behalf of myself and behalf of all the writers, cameramen, editors, the whole cast and crew of In the Crease, we want to wish you a very Merry Christmas and a safe, blessed, and prosperous New Year. Remember, when it comes to hockey, if you're in the game, you're in the crease. Buon Natale.